Okay, we better get away from politics. I know there's only 3 of us on the screen, but there's a few others of us who are looking on, and we're going to finish this book today. And what I would also love to ask, even at the beginning, is if there's somewhere we want to go from here. Do we want to take a break? Do we want to read another book like this? Do we want to do another 32-week Bible study, or like a theology integration? So we've got lots of options to think through, but let's talk about this book first, shall we? And I know we were on deck to read chapters 7 through 10 today, and I just want to open up and ask if you've got any comments, affirmations, or concerns about either those chapters or the book at large we can talk about.
Tim.
The thing that I found absolutely fascinating was her statement that about the crumbs on the table, and where the woman took the power away from Jesus. I thought that was a fascinating statement, because that also occurs with the woman who touches his garments.
Yeah,
he takes the power. And I that's an interesting dynamic that it didn't ever occur to me before. That did she take the power, or did the power just go into her?
it is very interesting to think about these women taking instead of being given. And the other balance, right, is that sometimes these people are described as faithful when they might really just be desperate. And it's just interesting to think about when desperation and faithfulness like become interchangeable.
Yeah, I've got to confess that I did very little of this reading, but as a mujer, and a mujer that knows a lot of other mujeres, okay, the women that I've had as parents in my schools, because I had inner city schools, and the women that come and clean our house, and the guys that cut our grass, they all from that group, yeah, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how can I say this? They are very, well, help me out, Tim. I love these women because they're so honest, they're so true. And if they're your friend, they're your friend for life. They will do anything that, if they love you, they will. They're just, they're the kindest, most loving people. And I think that it goes back to their very strong beliefs in God.
Say more about that. I mean, the author sort of talks about that, but I'd love to hear more from your perspective about that.
Well, when we say, when you're around other Hispanic women that are, that speak Spanish and all that, que Dios te bendiga. Every time you say, goodbye, you don't say adios. No, que Dios te bendiga. May God bless you. It always ends like that. Always. When the ladies leave the house after they've cleaned, Señora Cabula, que Dios te bendiga. Y a ustedes también. Un abrazo. Then you get a hug. And that's so standard. I don't know that means anything to anybody, but Where was I going with this, honey?
I'm not sure.
Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if our community was that gritty and tight and loving and authentic?
Yeah.
Are we not? I think that's a great question.
I don't know.
Well,
I mean, I don't know either. I really don't.
When you say our community, Lila, what do you mean?
Our church family.
Oh,
well, that was one of the reasons we joined St. Thomas, because of the openness and the family feeling that is there. The question that I have for the writer of the book is, I'm not sure I get a sense of the direction we go from here. And who, obviously the book is not intended for the women in the barrio, because they're not going to understand it. So I'm not sure where the audience is for the book.
My perception is she's probably writing in general to like seminarians.
Okay.
But that might be audience number one. But I think the other thing that I perceive she's trying to do, and that's where I think she's trying to say, listen, this like exploration and liturgy that happens is organic and natural, and something not only should you get behind, but maybe you could work to empower. So I see that as a potential. Obviously, she's writing to an educated audience, right? I mean, this is not stuff that's going to show up in Newsweek. Although I would say that I feel like the liturgy she produces is very accessible. Like, I think it makes sense. And what does she want us to do? I don't know that she wants us necessarily to go and make up our own liturgy like she did, but I do think this is kind of a cool test case in the sense of like, what do you are the liturgies that we're doing as a congregation, are they doing things like making a sacred space, not just literally, but in the middle of struggle? Do the liturgies and the practice we do they actually connect community? Do they represent anything that is bottom up, or is it all pushed down from above? And are they accessible for people who don't have means? I mean, I think all of that's important to her. So like, we have a candle altar and somebody's made that free for everybody. So anybody can light a candle, right? So to me, that's one of her principles. And you can come in as long as the front door is open, and you can do that. Now, not everybody knows that, so we could work to expand that. Taking communion, it requires a priest, doesn't have to be male in our tradition. So that makes us different from her background. We have an open invitation to it. I think that jives with what she's talking about, right? So the question is like, are we engaging in corporate liturgy and spiritual practices that are truly inclusive, inviting, and do those practices push us outward to be more just, more embodied in our bodies, more connected to both our families, extended families, community family? I think yes to all of those, just to be honest. Now, that doesn't mean that our work is done. I think what she says is these criteria of embodiment, family, and justice need to always be before us, not just because that's the Mujerista way, but because that's what like practicing kinship and growing in a faith that is wedded to justice and love ought be.
That makes perfect sense.
I
So
think
in
it would be interesting on All Saints Day to not necessarily do her that. I have to be honest. The R word, like I can say the word rape in a sermon. Liturgically, it strikes me as really tough. honestly, to talk about, like, especially more than one time, which shows up in this particular liturgy. I do wonder about making an ofrenda that has milk, honey, and dates, right? To say these are the saints who have brought us closer to the promised land in our lives. To me, that's real interesting. And that's kind of what she talks about, right? Is in her liturgy that they intentionally don't use wine. Milk and honey are symbols of the promised land. There's candles and there's people. Now, we've done All Saints, I think, pretty well here at St. Thomas in a lot of ways. We've done the Dia de los Muertos sort of style. We've had mariachis come in before to make it truly like a fiesta. We do gong ringing, which makes it solemn. And that's one time a year. But I could see adopting a lot of what she did to enhance that. I don't know that anybody wants to come up and like get some honeyed milk that day, but we could, we could. I would be very happy to do it. Can't consecrate that, but it could be a both and. And we could set up an ofrenda before you get to the chancel so that it's incredibly visible, and tell people, bring your token ahead, like bring it the Sunday before, and it's just going to sit here illuminated by candlelight all week.
That sounds like a cool idea.
I'd be real happy to do it because, All Hallows Eve, Halloween, is on a Sunday, which makes All Saints Day the next week. So we could set up the ofrenda in church All Saints Eve, and have these sort of candles sitting there all the time and really live into that liturgy. Now, that's just using this for one service, but I think she's asking us to consider how we use these elements week after week, day after day. And the real question is, are we as a church approaching orthodoxy, or are we trying to grow into orthopraxy?
You were going to say something, Lila.
Well, I think orthodoxy she's uninterested in that. And a couple of things is, I found this book really, really hard to understand in most places.
Oh.
But the afterword is really clear. I wish I'd read that first. And when she's talking about kinship and justice and the struggle, and this, and I think it's in chapter 8, she talks about the role of the Bible in this, in her, I guess in her theology, or in her creation of her liturgy and the creation of her own spirituality. Help me, Mike. I found that striking, that a lot of these people maybe can't read the Bible. It's not available for them to read, so they depend on what they hear in church and the interpretation they get from their priest. And I just never really, that had never sunken into me.
They also, and I've got to confess, I have not read hardly any of this book. Tim tells me about it, and shame on me, because I should. It's about Hispanics, and but anyway, the women that come and clean our house, and the guys that cut our grass, and do our yard work, that's the group they come from, especially the women.
Yeah.
And they have been cleaning for us for 20 years. So I know everything about them, and they know everything about me. And we give a hug. We hug each other before they leave. Te amo, Dora. un abrazo, I love you, a hug. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Well, I thought to pick up on what the Isla said, she made the statement, or I guess I wrote it down, that the non-biblical part of this service helps to include the Native Americans and African Americans. And I thought that was an interesting kind of leap. I was not expecting, but I could see, for example, we went down, we were in, I think we were in Peru at Lake Titicaca, and we went into a church service, and Graciela went in there, and it was very traditional. Females sat on one side, the men sat on the other. And I doubt if any of those people in there had access to a Bible.
Yep.
They heard the interpretation, whatever the priest wanted to give them, and they had to internalize that in some way. They would recite prayers because that's what they were taught. And it, how this helps them to make it through the day, I don't know.
The other thing that I experienced in South America when we were, because we lived in several places, the women, the older women that would come into the church, just walk and go on their knees immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And they kneel and go on their knees all the way to the altar. And often a son, or I'm assuming it's a son or a husband or a man will help them along. It was the most powerful, touching thing I've ever seen done. It's, yeah.
The other thing that we saw when we were in the Amazon, we met with an older lady who was, I'm not exactly sure what her position was, but she was kind of a religious person, but she melded both the native theology and some of the Catholic theology.
Yeah.
When her husband passed away, he didn't just pass away, he went into the river and would come back every day to talk to her.
Yeah, she would talk about that. Her name was Mezquita, and she lived in this little house, and it was the Rio, what river was it? It was the Tawaya River. And she believed that she came from that, her parents were in that, and she came from the river. She came from the water. And I'm not sure, and she was very religious. She prayed. I mean, I saw her praying. I spent an afternoon with her. It was, I can't even talk about it because it was so difficult. I mean, it was so, I didn't understand it. Mike, I just didn't understand it. But it's the most moving thing I've ever seen, ever experienced.
So I think this is some of the things that the author is talking about, how the non-biblical parts can help them carry through the day.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think the truth is what she's saying is the real criterion is that these people are really focused on survival.
Yes.
And it's interesting to think about like how the real fundamental need is to be able to survive, right? It's not to think through like, hey, am I really embodying the correct faith action? Is my theology right? It's sort of like, I have to survive, and I have this sense that God is enmeshed in the struggle
Yes.
with me for survival. And how can I draw strength from God's presence in the struggle?
Yes.
I once had a friend in Coronado. He was a naval aviator, and I know I've said this before, and I don't want to wear you out with this, but he was really big on telling me when he was doing bombing missions, for lack of a better word, of the Viet Cong, he did not ask God for forgiveness because he knew he was going to do it again tomorrow. And he didn't think it was okay to ask for forgiveness and then go back and do it again. He asked for the strength to do what he needed to do. And look, I understand that's a slippery slope, moral ground, right? Maybe he could have been a conscious objector or something, but he wasn't. So he you know, again, he was gonna be there doing his orders. And I think it's interesting to think about the difference between strength to carry on and forgiveness for when we make mistakes, and the difference. And I actually think the book draws out a little bit that in some ways, like forgiveness as we think of it in an orthodox way might be a luxury. And that these women don't have that luxury because they're focused on carrying on for the sake of their family, right? I mean, I feel like that's what part of what she's saying.
I think that's a big part of what she's saying, Mike. And it makes me feel so hypocritical to even just read this book instead of getting outside and having some praxis.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, though, this is like, if our response is guilt or shame, we've made a mistake. The truth is, we do things like a food distribution, which is like 3/4 of our clientele are Latinx. I know this because I fill the reports out every time. Hey, does everybody do that? No, but we do that. We give backpacks to McWhirter. 90% are going to Latinx people. We do that. I mean, these are things we do, whether I do them or not. We do them. And sure, can we do more? We can do more together. This is like what we say. Absolutely, we can do more together. Like that's our rally cry here.
Maybe I can register voters.
You know that, and I'm sorry, I've been interrupting, but we used to go to St. Paul's.
Yeah.
We've been to St. Paul's lots of times. I've taught the Virtus class over there, and this was the thing where the Catholic Church was doing. And there are, of course, lots of Hispanics, and there's a Spanish-speaking priest. They sing in Spanish. And the joy and the enthusiasm and they have amongst each other and with each other is really impressive. But they don't, and I don't know how it can go into the, because you're just down the street from them, you know, that somehow that can come together.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's so funny you mentioned that place, because I'll tell you, when I first got here, everybody in the church said, well, we need to figure out what to do for the apartments because that's an underserved population and we don't know how to get them. And then I went to the St. Paul's Fall Festival and I realized, oh no, they've got a place to go.
Yeah.
That's where they go because it's like, I mean, if you go to that festival, the
Yes.
Get Out of This World Festival, it's like visiting Latin America.
Yes.
I mean, there's stalls and booths and like microphones and like all kinds of food. Now, look, I am convinced that many of those folk who regularly attend, who are mujeristas or Latinx, I mean, I don't know what they do when they get divorced because they can't have the Eucharist. I don't know what they do if they're gay. So I don't know how to like say like, hey, folk, this is great. And if you don't fit that box, we got something over here that is, we've drawn the box bigger here.
They wouldn't come.
Say again?
I think they wouldn't come because it's not the Catholic Church. It's not.
And that is such an interesting thing about Catholicism to me, is
Yes.
how deeply like hooked in it is to people, even more so than having been Southern Baptist.
Yes.
You must be Catholic, even
Yes.
though you know your own tradition does not include you.
And that's what I think that is what she's saying here, is that there is a different theology, there is a different there's a different what you're saying, practice
Mhm.
that even though they can't participate because they're divorced or gay or whatever the problem is,
Yeah.
that is changing the ritual and the mass, whether the priest understands that or not.
And different priests manage it in different ways. They're not all, in what is the word? In agreement with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think when Tim asked the question, who's this book written for? I think it's also written to Roman Catholic folk who cannot do any other tradition because it's hardwired. You must be Catholic.
Right.
And it's saying, you don't have to wait, you grab.
No,
I come to St. Thomas. Well, I was just
Okay.
gonna go ahead, Tim.
it's not completely hardwired because the Protestants would not be making a lot of inroads in South America.
Yeah, that's fair. And the question is, what does it take to change? I mean, here's an interesting thing about Roman Catholic voters. Let's just say this, right? I talked to a lot of Catholic folk who, to be honest, would vote Democrat, except they have to be right to lifers.
Right.
So they become single issue voters, which is super interesting to me, particularly because most right to lifers don't offer any support for children who are in economic disparity, don't offer any support. They only offer shame to mothers who need help, but damn it, you better have that baby.
They don't provide health care. They don't
Nope.
provide medical care. They don't provide food. They don't provide anything.
And all of this is just a false dichotomy. And I want to say, I think her book is partially written to that. And I don't think it says exit the Catholic tradition, because I think most mujeristas are not going to do that. I think what she's saying is, you take those crumbs, ladies, and you take them together. And I actually found that to be very honest, like I find it to be very honest. And, there's this weird thing that happened in seminary, because my wife grew up evangelical and she felt called to ministry. And ultimately the way her tradition said no, because you're a woman. So she decided she was going to be a professor, because women can kind of get away with teaching sometimes. And a lot of our Methodist friends, because we went to a Methodist school, they said, well, look, just become Methodist, because they'll ordain women. And she said, I don't get to pick. I don't get to pick where my core identity lies. So good for you that you can just switch traditions. But this was like my core that said no. And so my wife's response is no to ministry. Like, I'm not gonna try to like change who I am. I'm just gonna say no to the church that raised me. So she's an attorney.
I obviously, you've heard, no, I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, all that. But St. Thomas makes me feel very close to the Catholic Church.
Gracia, I actually find like very inspiring and encouraging about you that you've been able to like sift away the chaff and really feast on the wheat of your Catholic upbringing. And I just think that's lovely, because I think the truth is every tradition's got lots of chaff.
Oh, yes.
But I love that you tell these really affirmative stories that you've had with clergy.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Graciela, you're amazing. You're amazing.
Oh, you're sweet, Lila.
No, really, you are.
It was all my grandmothers. I had 2 great grandmothers. They were amazing. It was about them. Thank you.
Let me offer, if I can. Julia sent me an email this morning, and she had a couple affirmations. She really liked the description of the liturgy as not so much a distribution of bread, but a gathering of the fragments of the bread of the lives of many women. I also thought that was a lovely phrase, right? Gathering together, not just distributing. She really appreciated the multiplicity of leadership, power being decentralized and shared. And, you know, it is interesting because when you think about the Episcopal Church, the Roman Church, any church with bishops are inherently hierarchical, but there is a way of doing ministry, I think, even though I haven't all completely figured it out, that is about using the hierarchy to undermine the hierarchy.
You do that because you signed a contract for 10 years. Okay. And you can't be thrown out of the church for things that you do, other than, if you commit a crime, yeah, but other than that, you pretty much have a total autonomy except in cases like the virus or things like that.
Yeah, actually, I don't even have a term limit. I have to retire at 72. And of course, that can go either way, right? That can leave people in place that are non-functional, or it can allow you to like really preach your conscience. And of course, we all know the trick is to encourage change without losing people. And that can be really hard. Sometimes you do have to say time for you to go, probably. But that's tough. I think also, there's this interesting bit, again about, and I think this comes back to discussions we've had about privilege. It's not that privilege is wrong. It just happens. The question is, what do you do with your privilege? And so, like, one of the things that I love to do personally, I'm not patting myself on the back, but I love to tell stories in which I am the villain publicly. And I think that's a way of de-hierarchalizing the priesthood, honestly, to say, like, I don't always get it right, and now I'm recognizing a time I got it wrong. There's times I get it right, and that's fine. We share those. But like, if we're always the hero of our own story, I think we reinforce the spiritual hierarchy instead of saying, look, I'm wearing this collar and I have this position of authority, and let me tell you how I have messed this up.
Well, and I think that's a big difference from a lot of the, all I can speak about is Catholic priest. they'll read the Bible and then they'll try to interpret it, but they won't bring anything of themselves into the sermon.
Most clergy don't. Most
and-
clergy don't unless they're the hero.
Well, and that's why when I leave church, when you give the homily, I've learned something about you and I've learned something about me.
I agree with what Tim is saying, except when I was at St. Bernadette's and the Carmelites were there, some of the Carmelites could be like that.
Well, maybe one or two of them.
Yeah, well, not all of them, but the Carmelites as a group, I just really, really love those men, and I learned so much from them. Yeah, but
Well-
Tim's right. I guess some of them could, and
Well, see the order priest don't report to the bishop.
Yeah.
So they've got their own bishop, and so they're somewhat autonomous from the local bishop.
Yeah.
They're able to do more things than diocesan priest. Are there order priests in the Episcopal Church?
There's a couple of them. You know, the trick is the order, and this is just so funny, right? Like, we do have them. We have religious orders for non-clergy as well. And actually, let me think about that. I think all priests are under the jurisdiction of some bishop, even though they may not be in their home diocese. So, but we do have orders like the Order of St. John, which is both for clergy and lay people. So those exist. I do think probably everybody has to be under jurisdiction of a bishop. I think so, even though that bishop may not be immediate. Like, there's people in Texas who are from the Diocese of New York and they haven't moved. Like Craig Morgan, who is a priest in our parish, I think he's still canonically resident like in Tennessee, even though he's been here for 10 years, because he retired there and moved here. So he's licensed here, but his ultimate person is in Tennessee. I just think though the other thing, Tim, is it's like, and this is really different from the Roman tradition, like it's just hard to get us in trouble. We can't get defrocked. We can get inhibited. But most bishops are pretty cautious about that. Just because you start inhibiting a bunch of people, it looks bad. You know, like it looks bad. So they have to say why they're doing it, to be honest. And they can't just say, like, I don't like Mike's preaching. You can't inhibit a priest for that. It has to be like he's committed foul play, or he's done conduct unbefitting a clergy person, and that looked like X. Yeah.
They can yank him.
You know, I think Andy tries to undermine some of this by honestly, I mean, I think part of the way we do it is we make our schedule open to any request. We show up to, like, you know, like little church events. Like we, you know, again, I think we try to say yes or why not. Maybe these are some of the ways that we can try to undermine the hierarchy that we're enmeshed in.
And I think that's what she's trying to do in here, is to undermine the hierarchy and give power back to the local people.
Yes.
And change the mass to accommodate them in their daily lives and make it more important to them.
Yeah.
Empower them.
I agree. Julia pulled out the line that maybe I'll try out in church. After you consecrate the bread, and obviously in hers, she's not quite doing that in the normal way. The line is, the gifts of God for the people of God, come and eat joyfully, with the resolution and understanding that we will continue to struggle and God will always sustain us if we sustain one another. Come and feast. I know that's long, but it's kind of a cool line, you know?
No, it's beautiful. It's actually quite beautiful. Yeah.
I love that, Mike.
I think we're just it's gonna show up on Sunday for a while. You know?
I'm not internally, I'm struggling with this, and that is that in the Catholic Church, the Catholic women, generally speaking, I mean, the women I know that are Catholic, especially working class women, and because I had schools, and you've heard me say that the people that clean their house, and they don't want to be in charge. I don't think so.
That's interesting. How we approach this, I think, is they feel empowered, but they're both empowered and they're both not empowered at the same time. They do all the work in the church.
Yes.
Which gives them power, but the priest doesn't. Some priests recognize it and some priests don't.
Yeah.
You know, they like when they clean the house, when they treat, I sort of sometimes think that they treat church like they treat cleaning our house.
Or their own house.
Or their own house.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're my friends, you know, they've become like my sisters. They've been working for us for 20 years.
So what, where do we go from here with this book?
Man, that's always a really great question. What do you think?
Well, I think there should be some way of I don't know how we help people with the daily struggle with the Mass. What lessons or how we would take what we've learned here and put it into our daily lives and into our Mass and into our church community. I guess I've never thought about that. So I don't really know how to put it into the liturgy. And what that is going to do for the other people in the pews. Because I think there are some people who can incorporate that into their lives and some people who can't.
Lila, what do you think?
Well, what Tim said is pretty well what I think. I mean, I'm kind of tired of talking about stuff. It would be nice to do something. I think thinking differently is important. There's such a I'm kind of tongue-tied. There's these people that are really struggling to survive. And these women in the church who really are the backbone of the church, and as you have said, Mike, also in our church as well. Do women step up into leadership positions? I think she's advocating that women take these leadership positions,
Yes.
that they take the hem of the robe, that they get those crumbs from under the table. And I'm not sure how we foster that.
Yeah.
In our community or in the larger, our larger. I mean, we have some reach, right? Like Mike, you've said with the McWhorter School. You've talked, Mike, about having more women vergers, right?
Yep.
So where are these women? Why aren't women doing that? And I mean, I thought about that last week. I mean, why? We have many strong women in our church home, many women who are truly those steel magnolias.
Yes.
How important is it for them to be more visible? And I thought, I can't figure out how I could be a verger with my sidekick here. I think that would not work.
And why is that? Why would that
Well,
not work?
I don't know what to do with her.
Can she not just go with you?
I think maybe in time, after maybe we've been together for a while, and she's got a really good downstay, which she would need, right? You'd need to. Do the vergers walk around a little bit, right?
Yeah, they do.
I mean, behind the railing.
Let me think about that. Yeah, well, they bring the chalice up, you know.
Okay, so maybe we should explore that, Mike.
I kind of think it's interesting to think about, an animal being part of our ministry. Yeah, I think we should explore it. If the dog doesn't bite somebody, then what's the worst going to happen? People don't like dogs.
Well, she's much better mannered than Rennie ever was. I'll tell you that. She's freakishly human.
Yeah.
Freakishly human.
Yeah.
Your dogs too?
Well, I mean, look, Maggie can just roam, or she would just lay down in the chancel. She wouldn't even get up.
Yeah.
But she's
right.
unique that way, and she's old too.
Well, and this dog's 4.5 years old.
Yeah.
When Emery was little and she'd wander around, I love that.
I
love that.
Loved that too.
Yeah. And
loved that.
This is really important, is us being able to tell parents of kids who wander, I love that. Not just, oh, that's okay. That was a gift to me.
Yes, no, I loved it too. I loved it too.
Well, Lila, let's talk more about that. I've got somebody coming in, so I'm going to have to draw our time. But before I do, I want to lay a couple of the seeds about thoughts. And I know there's only three other people, but just to think through. There is a great book we could read about theological language called She Who Is. And it's about the power of, frankly, how praying shapes believing and words matter, and how we can better express the universality of God, male, female, they, them, their, in our language. So it's kind of a classic in the importance of gendered speech.
Who's the author?
Elizabeth Johnson. I have the book. I'll lend it if you want it, but we could read that together. There's a fantastic, not fantastic, we've done the disciple Bible studies before, and we haven't done number 2, which happens to be my favorite, Genesis, Exodus, Luke, and Acts. There's another one called Christian Believer that's both about theological writing and Bible study. And these are long-term ones we can do over Wednesdays. There are some other books on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a book about Black theology by James Cone. This is for men. There's a book about Indian, and I mean like from India, Christology, and it's called The Crucified Guru, interestingly enough. So there's a couple of books like that we could do. We can totally change it up. I just read this really fantastic book called Nonviolent Communication, and it's about how we can actually be peacemakers in what we say, both to ourselves and other people. And I thought it was really insightful. I'm going to just leave this open and solicit some more feedback. If you've got any opinions, please send me an email, or let's talk some more, because I do really treasure Wednesday morning studies, regardless of how many people show up. It is a way of renewing my education and connecting with you. So let's think about it, and let me know either specific resources or, hey, I wish we did more blank. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds great.
I appreciate you all so much. Thanks for taking the time to read this book. And like I say, I know it was very different from the other two, but hopefully helpful, and will continue to be a help.
Well, it certainly expanded my vocabulary.
I am grateful that we are all in the kingdom of God together. Okay, take care, everybody. I will see you soon.
Okay, bye.